Dear colleagues, excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the first CVF Ambassadorial level meeting in New York. And I thank everyone who has joined us, also some of our colleagues who have joined us from different time zones. And I have the honor today to chair this meeting as the representative of the current CVF president. And I'm very pleased to be also joined by my fellow Troika members, Ambassador Amrit and Kabua, the permanent representative of Marshall Islands, and Ambassador Tai Amde, the permanent representative of Ethiopia. And we are extremely pleased to have with us today Mr. Selwyn Hart, the Special Advisor of the Secretary General on Climate Action and the Assistant Secretary General for the Climate Action Team. Mr. Hart will provide an update on the priorities that the Secretary General has set out for climate on the road to COP26, which he has defined as the make or break year. We are also extremely honored to have among us Mr. Archie Young, the United Kingdom's lead climate negotiator since 2016. He will update us about the United Kingdom's priorities for COP26 and explain how we propose to use the months ahead to make progress on these goals. We are also very happy to welcome Ambassador Javier Diaz-Carmona, the Senior Fellow, Global Center on Adaptation. He will brief us about the work of the CVF Secretariat and the priorities of the CVF presidency in the lead up to the COP26 and beyond. And last but not the least, we have our dear friend, Ms. Babita Bishop, the Deputy Director of the Division of External Affairs, Green Climate Fund. And Babita will share with us GCF's efforts to align its work with the special needs of the climate vulnerable countries. Excellencies, dear colleagues, we are hosting this meeting today with a specific objective to discuss how the CVS members in New York can contribute to achieve the priorities set by the group for the COP26 and beyond. We wish to explore ways to further enhance the coordination among the delegations of the CVF member states in New York. Additionally, we wish to discuss possible ways and means to further leverage and the strength of the CVF to promote its core interests in the upcoming GA and ECOSOC events, including HLPF, UNGA High-Level Week, and so on. Today's meeting comes at a time when we are just about 6 months away from COP26. And we have just concluded two important high-level meetings, the Leaders Summit on Climate in April last month, and the Petersburg Climate Dialogue earlier this month. Speaking at the Leaders Dialogue, my Prime Minister highlighted the dire consequences facing climate vulnerable countries due to the double jeopardy of COVID-19 pandemic and climate-induced disasters. Bangladesh's presidency's current priority is to promote international solidarity to support the most vulnerable countries. The CVF countries are the least contributors to global greenhouse gases, yet they are the worst victims of the climate change. The support from the international community to tackle this enormous challenge has never been enough. They need to depend heavily on their own resources and locally led adaptation measures. For example, every year, Bangladesh is spending about $5 billion, an average of 2.5% of our GDP, on climate adaptation and resilience building. We believe that COP26 should focus more on actions and results, especially to address these pressing issues. The success of COP26 will largely depend on its ability to fulfill our hopes and aspirations, that is of the most vulnerable countries. And we believe priority could be given or should be given inter alia to financing and technology transfer, adaptation and resilience building, and ambitious national determined contributions or NDCs, addressing outstanding issues of Article 6 and loss and damage, support national efforts for COVID-19 recovery, and so on. Dear colleagues, as the current CVF President, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has taken some important initiatives towards that end. In October last year, she declared that the 31st of December 2020 should be the cutoff date for our midnight survival deadline to reduce carbon emissions to the lowest level. She urged governments to submit highly ambitious NDCs to meet that deadline. In March this year, she launched the Mudib Climate Prosperity Plan, a transformative climate concept which aims to leverage international and private sector support for domestic climate actions. Ambassador Kamumna, who is here with us today, will provide further details on this and other plans of the presidency. Just to highlight the most important one, that is one of the priorities, there will be a CVF high-level meeting on the sidelines of the Glasgow COP. And we expect that to culminate in the Dhaka-Glasgow Declaration. This communique is expected to capture the aspirations and concerns of CVF leaders and ministers at COP26. We of course have a very rich panel of experts here and distinguished speakers, and we'll be of course listening to them. So before I actually turn the floor over to them, just a few words on housekeeping. Each of the briefers will have roughly about 5 minutes to make their presentations, and of course they'll be here to respond to questions that may come from the floor. We expect this to be an interactive session after the presentations are made. And if you wish to take the floor during the interactive session, please do indicate your interest in the chat function. And I shall further make a request to all of you to keep your microphones muted unless you're given the floor. But it'll be lovely if everybody's cameras can be put on, especially when they're speaking. So with those a few preliminary remarks, I would like to now invite, and I have the pleasure to invite Ambassador Kabua to deliver her remarks as a member of the Troika. Ambassador Kabua, my dear sister, you have the floor.
Thank you so very much. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and my respect to you and all the panelists and all the members that are here with us today. This is my first time in a long time to really, see you all, and also to participate in a CVF kind of meeting. So, Your Excellency, at the outset, let me assure you that the Marshall Islands remain supportive and very appreciative of this group and your leadership, Your Excellency. And I think I speak for everyone in welcoming your leadership as our chair. We offer our warmest congratulations and look forward to working closely with you and, moving together with the members. My remark will be very brief, but I just want to highlight something. So for decades, we all have spent countless time at the UN and beyond, working to outreach and share our common story of vulnerability. This forum serves as an opportunity to find common ground and collective viewpoints in responding to climate impact. So rather than just hearing our own voices or preaching to the choir, we need to continue engagement with our partners outside this forum. My observation is very brief, and I just want to share that this is about all of our partner nations outside this group agree with the importance and urgency of a much improved global response to climate adaptation. But once we peel apart the nice words of ministers and ambassadors and enter a negotiation setting, we too often find ourselves facing a trust gap. We don't trust that commitment to urgency will be met by variable finance, which we can actually access. And at the same time, many of our partners don't trust that trust that we are not going to all end up in the same stale global debate about North-South development politics, where we have all been trapped for decades, even as the rest of the world had changed and moved on. What's so clear for me are that those that are really suffering are most from this political showdown on adaptation are our members, the member of this group and others. This is our story, vulnerable nations with so much at stake from continued inaction. So I suggest that as we consider our work plan this year and beyond, we can do so while helping to close this trust gap on adaptation. So this is what I can offer at this time, but I'm ready to see what I can do better in my clarification if there is any question. But rest assured, Madam Chair, that we are here to support you as Chair and to work together across the board with the members. We stand ready to assist where we can. Good to see everyone, especially one of our original negotiator, Mr. Hart. He's been so, I'm so proud of him. But I stand ready to be available when you need me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my dear Sister Ambassador Kabua. And I take this opportunity to also congratulate you on Marshall Islands' excellent leadership in leading our group. And thank you again for highlighting the importance for meaningful partnership, climate financing, and global actions to mitigate the challenges that we face. And I think you have made a very important point. We need to close the trust gap in adaptation. I cannot agree more with you on that. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And of course, you're here and there may be an opportunity to again speak for you. I now have the pleasure to invite Ambassador Tai Amde, the permanent representative of Ethiopia and the other member of the Troika, to make his statement. Ambassador Tai, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Rabab, and dear colleagues and friends, all protocols observed. First of all, I would like to extend my strong appreciation to the mission of Bangladesh for convening this ambassadorial level meeting for the member states of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. It is my great pleasure to join you for this important, really very important meeting. This meeting comes at a time when we are considering ways of building back better from the COVID-19 pandemic. It is highly unfortunate that the pandemic threatens to reverse the gains that have been registered over the past couple of years. The most vulnerable countries stand to lose the most in particular. While there have been multiple reasons that underline the importance of the CVF, the pandemic has helped to further shed light on its vitality. As we move closer to COP26, it is imperative for us to focus on the bigger prizes. I would like to commend the efforts by Bangladesh, the Troika members, and others for the continued effort to encourage countries to submit updated national determined contributions with commitment. It is also important to pursue climate action both at the national and global levels, alongside the ongoing concerted global effort to mitigate the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we were referring this morning in one of the meetings of the least developing countries, for many countries and in Africa and least developing countries, we are indeed at a crossroad between the abyss and the deep ravine, and also the hope and aspiration to build back better. One determining factor in our effort to build back better and greener is the issue of finance. Finance needs to be available to developing countries for mitigation, adaptation, and disaster response and recovery. Climate vulnerable countries should be able to stand firm in their pursuit of financial commitment by the international community. CVF and the group of CVF finance ministers have been doing a commendable job in requesting the major economies to allocate more resources. The upcoming COP26 is yet another opportunity to continue voicing our concern in this regard. As a member of the Troika and a vulnerable country, Ethiopia treats the agenda of climate change with utmost priority by launching, for that matter, its climate resilient green economy strategy in 2011 prior to the Paris COP. The process of CRG implementation has moved from a project-based approach and into that of now fully mainstreamed into the National Development Plan, with the government allocating considerable resources for both climate mitigation and adaptation interventions. It is among the 6 pillars of our 10-year perspective plan which runs from 2020 to 2030. Currently, despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19, we have finalized the process of further enhancing our first nationally determined contribution. Following, for example, the planting of 5 billion trees last year, my country has today, on the May 18, 2021, launched a major program of planting 6 billion trees, mainly in rain-fed areas. This program will help in controlling erosion, environmental degradation, and help fight climate change. Finally, I would like to conclude by restating the fact that implementation of the Paris Agreement is the only way to halt the current rate of damage caused by climate change. And I want to express my country's continued support to Bangladesh as a chair of CVF in giving nuance to this agenda in the lead up to COP26. I thank you, Ambassador.
I thank you very much, Ambassador Tai, for your insightful remarks, and we would certainly count on your support in the coming months. And thank you also for highlighting especially the special challenges being faced by Africa and the LDCs, especially now as we grapple with the double jeopardy of COVID crisis. Can you hear me? I'm being told that I can't be heard. You can hear me? Okay. Thank you also for highlighting the critical issue of financing for mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. And it is imperative, of course, that we work together in finding a results-based and action-oriented outcome for the CVF countries from COP26. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Now I have the pleasure to invite the Special Advisor of the Secretary General on Climate Action and Assistant Secretary General for the Climate Action Team, Mr. Selwyn Hurd, to address us. Mr. Selwyn Hurd, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador, and Excellencies. Good afternoon to all of you. It's certainly a pleasure, and I dare say, to be back home in the CVF. I've in a past as distinguished ambassador of the Marshall Islands Sainted. I work actively within this group many moons ago, and it is the strength of the CVS. Its diverse membership really is a strength of the CVS and with CVF. And without your active participation, engagement, and leadership, many critical aspects of the Paris Agreement, such as the 1.5-degree goal, the provisions on loss and damage, the 5-year stock take, the Green Climate Fund, and I can go on and on. Many of these critical elements that are now part of the global effort and narrative around climate change would not have been possible were it not for your leadership over the years. And as we head towards COP26 in this make or break year that the Secretary General continues to call it for climate, he has identified 3 major priorities that must be delivered to ensure that we can place the world on a safe, resilient, and sustainable pathway. First, keeping the 1.5-degree goal within reach. That must be one of the overall priorities of this effort. And to achieve this, we need as many countries, cities, businesses to join the growing coalition committing to net zero by 2050. At present, countries representing 70% or 73% of global emissions have made net zero by mid-century commitments. We need more to join. But a net zero commitment or expressing this long-term vision is only credible if that long-term net zero commitment is backed up by a short-term ambitious plan in the form of a nationally determined contribution. And we need more countries, including those that have and have not made net zero commitments, to place on the table before COP26 an ambitious nationally determined contributions. Following the summit convened by President Biden, we now have all G7 countries committing to net zero by 2050, and submitting a more ambitious nationally determined contribution. And we have, with the exception of Australia, we have all developed G20 countries committing to net zero and either submitting or promising to submit a more ambitious nationally determined contribution ahead of COP26. So I will encourage all of you in your diplomatic outreach to countries that have not made this net zero commitment or submitted an NDC, really to prioritize this as one of your acts to the major economies. Members of the G20 account for 80% of global emissions. We cannot keep the 1.5 degree goal within reach unless the G20 and other major economies commit to net zero, but back up that commitment with more ambitious nationally determined contributions. His second priority is on finance and aligning private and public finance with the goals of the Paris Agreement. I must confess that we're very worried. While we see some encouraging signs on the private finance side, we're very worried over the signals that we're seeing on the public finance side. Public finance alone will not get us there, but it's a symbol of trust and confidence in the multilateral process, and it is needed most by the poorest, smallest, and most vulnerable members of the international community. We have not, developed countries have not met the $100 billion goal. They have not. And it is absolutely essential that at the upcoming G7 summit, which is hosted by the country my very good friend Archie has the honor to represent, the United Kingdom, that G7 countries not only recommit to the $100 billion goal, they've been doing this for the last decade, but lay out clear roadmaps towards achieving the $100 billion goal. For the G7 nations and other developed nations, this means at minimum a doubling of their climate finance commitments for the period 2021 to 2025. And this is a concrete act that the Secretary General has made to all G7 nations. And we hope that the CVS will join us or join him in that call for G7 nations to, at a minimum, double their climate finance commitments for the period 2021 to 2025. And this brings me to his third priority, securing a breakthrough on adaptation and resilience. And I know that this is a priority for all members of the CVF. Adaptation, by any measure, adaptation and resilience has not been treated equally in the climate process and in the climate regime. Adaptation finance represents 21% of total climate finance flows. This translates into $16.8 billion a year. UNEP has estimated, and Ambassador, I'm heartened to hear that Bangladesh has its own estimates on adaptation. UNEP estimates that the total adaptation cost for developing countries at present is at a minimum $70 billion a year. And that this will grow or could grow to $300 billion a year by 2030. Compare that with what is being provided, $16.8 billion a year. And this is why the Secretary General has also called on G7 countries, as well as the MDBs, to increase the share of their finance for adaptation and resilience to at least 50% of total climate finance flows. We need to urgently close the adaptation finance gap. He's also called for simplifying access to the most vulnerable. At present, SIDS receive 2% of total climate finance flows, and the least developed countries 14% of total climate finance source. These are countries on the front lines of the climate crisis. The world needs to do a lot better in ensuring that these countries can have access, better access, and better terms of access to climate finance to support their adaptation and resilience needs. And we're supportive of the task force that was launched by the UK at the CDM conference. But Archie, that task force needs to deliver concrete proposals and recommendations well before COP26. And we've communicated this message to the UK and to Fiji, who have the honor. It must deliver concrete proposals and recommendations on how to address issues of capacity and access to finance for the vulnerable countries. So, Excellencies, these are the three priorities of the Secretary General. Your voice is needed more than ever for us to achieve these priorities. Like no other COP, outcomes must be delivered ahead of the COP itself. So the upcoming G7 summit in June, middle of June in Cornwall in the United Kingdom, represents almost a last chance opportunity for the developed nations, the wealthiest among us, to show and to deliver concrete commitments on finance and on adaptation. We believe that this will help to build momentum. This will help to spur and incentivize action and ensure that we can truly ensure that this make or break year for climate leaves no one behind. I thank you so much, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hart. Thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation, and it's really heartening to note and the high importance that you have placed on having concrete commitments on finance and adaptation, and especially to meet climate finance goals for the developed economies and the critical need for 50-50 balance of financing for adaptation and mitigation. We will continue to count on your strong voice of reason and support as we prepare for COP26. Thank you again very much. And you're here with us. I'm sure there'll be many questions from the floor in the interactive part of the meeting. And you'll all be very pleased to know that we have a large number of ambassadors who have joined us. And I'm very happy to have them here with us today. Now I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Archie Young, the United Kingdom's lead climate negotiator, to deliver his remarks. Mr. Young, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and Your Excellencies. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and always a pleasure to follow Selwyn as well. He always sets the challenge for me to try and deliver against. But actually, I agree with the challenge that he has set out. And can I first recognize the leadership that Bangladesh is showing in terms of standing up for climate vulnerable country priorities, both through your leadership of the CVF, but also through your founding membership of the Adaptation Action Coalition alongside the UK, and recognize the fact that our COP President designate, Alok Sharma, will be visiting Bangladesh soon. And just yesterday, our champion for adaptation and resilience, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, our minister, she met with the Bangladeshi High Commissioner just yesterday. So we are very keen to engage with Bangladesh, but also with all of the members of the CVF, many of whom your country's, the COP President designate has already visited, and many of which are on his list. We are absolutely committed to an ambitious and inclusive COP26, and climate vulnerable countries are at the heart of that. And when we talk about ambition, we mean ambition on emissions, on adapting to impacts, and on scaling up finance. I think a lot of people, when they hear us talk about ambition, they assume we simply mean mitigation. We absolutely do not. We are determined to champion adaptation and finance and loss and damage as well. And climate vulnerable countries can be the most powerful voices in calling for ambition and action on all of those. So we commit that we will do our part as incoming presidency to push for more action, but we also welcome the collaboration with you to do so. You will have heard that we have set out 4 goals for COP26. These are very much aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement. And I hope and I know from what I've heard that they are also in line with the goals of climate vulnerable countries. The first, securing global net zero and keeping 1.5 degrees in reach. The second, rapidly scaling up adaptation to protect communities and natural habitats. The third, linked to that, is mobilizing the finance, both public and private, and specifically, as Selwyn said, increasing the share of finance that goes to adaptation. And then the fourth is working together to deliver, recognizing that the scale of the transition that is required requires action from everybody, from governments through to individuals, non-state actors, civil society, businesses. Everybody needs to work together to deliver. Now, we are pursuing this through three routes. One is national actions, and that is largely the commitments that countries need to make before COP26. And this has been mentioned already about the importance of action before COP. That includes, of course, nationally determined contributions. It includes long-term strategies in line with net zero. It includes adaptation communications, which are a central part of being able to understand where we are collectively in terms of meeting adaptation needs. And it includes really pushing donors hard to scale up their finance. Linked to that, the national actions, we're also pressing for coalitions to accelerate action. And those are linked to our 5 campaigns around nature, adaptation and resilience, finance, zero emission vehicles, energy transitions. And that is really enabling countries and organizations who want to go further faster to do so, to provide the opportunity through energy transition councils, through sustainable land use dialogues, through these different coalitions that enable countries and organizations to show the art of the possible. And then the third, central to my job and my heart, is the multilateral process. And on that, just some examples of how we have been taking forward work on some of the priorities you have mentioned. In the last few months, we have held consultations on finance. We have held focused consultations on the global goal on adaptation. And we have held consultations on how we can operationalize the Santiago network on loss and damage. And I think that last one is a good example of the work that needs to be done before COP. We have a decision from Madrid about the Santiago network that can connect vulnerable countries to the assistance they need. And we are committed to making sure that that gets up and running so that it can be delivering in time for COP. Similarly, the Climate and Development Ministerial that Selwyn mentioned, that was an example of us trying to make sure that we can bring together vulnerable countries and donors and other organizations to focus on what can be done now. The task force on access to finance that Selwyn mentioned is a very good example. We want to get that up and running and delivering in advance of COP. We cannot wait until November to take action on these issues. Now, this is a challenging time for organizing a multilateral process. And we recognize the challenges of COVID on governments, but also on just the ability to have virtual discussions and move things forward. But we do need to move up a gear. The first 3 weeks of June will be the subsidiary body meeting for the UNFCCC. And it is essential that we move to a new gear. It has been really valuable to have lots of discussions where we share our views, share our learning. That is absolutely essential, but we need to get our homework done. And that means moving towards solutions. That means moving towards text. And that means doing so in a way which is inclusive and transparent and recognizes the challenges that countries have in connecting virtually, but also recognizing the absolute urgency of moving this forward. So you have our commitment that we use all of our diplomatic levers. You saw us at the UN Security Council debate that we held on climate security. We have the G7 that has been mentioned, and we continue to use all of our levers. And we hope we're doing so from a position of strength and solidarity given our own climate commitments. But really, we want to work with you, the climate vulnerable countries, because your voice is so much more powerful. And when we can work together, I think that's how we can achieve that ambitious and inclusive outcome for COP. And our mission here in New York is ready to work with you on all of those. I happen to be based in New York at the moment as well, and always at your disposal to follow up on any of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Young. Thank you very much, and thank you for providing us. One second. And thank you for providing us with a very clear perspective about the COP presidency's priorities for the summit, many of which, of course, converges with our priorities also. And thank you also for your assurance to prioritize on the particular situation of the climate vulnerable countries. We can't agree more with you about the urgency for action now, and I think the COP26 provides us with that opportunity. Thank you very much, Mr. Young, and we look forward to your continued engagement in the process forward. Thank you very much. Okay, we now have. Do we have Ambassador Carmona already here?
Yes, I am here.
He's already here. Yes. Then I think I'll present. I'll give the floor to Ambassador Carmona. Thank you. I'm glad that you could finally join us. You were having some technical issues, I believe. But Ambassador Carmona, it's my pleasure now to give the floor to you to share with us the priorities and the roadmap of the COP of the CVF presidency. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much indeed for facilitating this gathering, this very important gathering.
Ambassador, I think your sound is not coming. Can you raise the volume of your microphone or come closer? Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little bit low, the volume.
Let's try now.
Better, but all right. You please continue. I hope the others can also hear you better. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Since I have a presentation, I would like to just to be sure that the presentation is ready. Okay. Well, good morning, Excellencies, distinguished representatives, colleagues, and friends of the country members of the CVF B20. Next, please. The CVF was created in year 2009 with the aim of establishing a global partnership of countries highly affected by the consequences of global warming due to climate change. The forum's member countries are actively seeking a firm and urgent solution to the current intensification of climate change at the national and international levels. Currently, the forum consists of 48 member states, and it is a multilateral voluntary membership agency with a rotative presidency with Bangladesh sharing it at the present. Next. The 48 countries are distributed in 5 regions, all of them with a high climate vulnerability and which has been hit by increasingly frequent and devastating climate phenomena, with great social and economic negative consequences for the countries. The 5 regions are Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia, the Pacific, Middle East and North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Next, please. The CVF B20 organizes its works through a secretariat hosted by the Global Center on Adaptation, GCA, which was founded in year 2018. The global office is hosted by the Netherlands in Rotterdam, with regional offices in Africa, South Asia, and Asia Pacific. GCA acts as a solution broker, bringing together governments, private sector, civil society, intergovernmental bodies, and knowledge institutions. The GCA is the main sponsor of the CVF Secretariat, hence the importance of this close relationship and complementarity in the actions carried out by both organizations. Next, please. Last year, in the framework of the United Nations General Assembly, the UN sponsored a CVF international event of highest relevance for the vulnerable countries. The CVF launched to the world its Midnight Climate Survival Deadline campaign. It called on all nations to deliver enhanced climate targets under the Paris Agreement by December 31st, 2020. Next. Over 73 countries responded to the midnight appeal. The CVF countries has been champions for the 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature limit, which is established in the Paris Agreement. All the NDCs filed were organized and processed by the CVF team, and the results of this analysis will be published soon, making it a tremendous contribution to the world. Next, please. Regarding finance, financial constraints which are facing the countries are very relevant, especially those who are the most vulnerable to climate change, making the CVF countries to continue raising their voices for the fulfillment of the pledges from the developing countries to the developed countries, to provide $100 billion a year from 2020 to support actions to tackle climate change, as well as advocate for a fair balance in the distribution of financial resources with a 50-50 proportion to adaptation versus mitigation. Equally important are the carbon markets and loss and damages issues. Next, please. Perhaps one of the most innovative and tailor-made new financial mechanisms for vulnerable countries are the Climate Prosperity Plans 2030 that include, among many other features, new jobs created, cost saving from shifting to renewable energy early, foreign direct investment opportunities, contributions to economic growth, and consequent tax revenue growth potential. Next. The CVF will hold CVF Regional Dialogues, which are meant to be part of the preparatory activities of the CVF towards the COP26. 3 regional dialogues will be carried out with the full participation of the respective country members, starting with the Latin America and Caribbean region, and the regional ministerial declaration will be one of the main outcomes from each regional dialogue, and together will be the base to establish the Dhaka-Glasgow Declaration of the CVF, which will be presented during the CVF high-level meeting at COP26. Next. The Vulnerable Group of 20, the V20, was established in the year 2015 as part of the CVF, and it is formed by the Ministers of Finance of the Forum to strengthen economic and financial responses to climate change. Please take note that on July the 8th will take place the Climate Vulnerable Finance Summit with the V20 Ministerial Dialogue 7. This is especially important because the V20 is intended to be the own financial architecture of vulnerable countries to tackle climate change. Next. The CVF, without being a negotiating group, can exert an enormous influence on the international community gathered at COP26, exposing its main priorities already described, such as on how to safeguard the 1.5 Celsius degrees, achieving agreed finances, including carbon markets, and the completion of an international 1.5 Celsius degree regime. Present and strengthen with potential international partners and financial bodies the CVF V20 Climate Prosperity Plans, and discuss and present actions to achieve new financial options to more effectively address the losses and damages, as well as to present to the international community its priorities at international level, such as the CVF V20 Climate Prosperity Plans, resource mobilization of the CVF V20 Joint Multi-Donor Fund established at the UNOPS, the CVF Parliamentary Forum, which is an innovative partnership among the CVF and the International Parliamentary Union, IPU. And also very important, a call for the establishment of a UN International Climate Resilience Day. awareness is our next step to be taken here at the heart of the United Nations and everywhere. And this is also where you, distinguished representatives of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, are called to play such an important political role. The CVF Presidency and Secretariat would like to make an international call and raise the voices around the establishment of a UN International Climate Resilience Day. Achieving and being part of this as diplomats will be your huge challenge, but at the same time, your great contribution to the future generations and to the world. Thank you very much indeed for your attention, Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Carmona. And again, I think our apologies for the low sound. I hope the volume is better now. Okay, all right. I thank you again for your very rich presentation, especially for sharing the roadmap on the CVF presidents in the lead up to the COP26 and beyond, and also for highlighting the priorities of the Dhaka Glasgow CVF declaration. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And now I have the pleasure to invite the last speaker on our panel of the expert panel this afternoon, Ms. Babita Bishop, the Deputy Director of the Division of External Affairs and of the Green Climate Fund, to make her presentation. Babita, you have the floor. Babita, are you here? Yes.
Hello,
okay, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Thank you.
please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, and Ambassador Abab in particular, for giving us the opportunity to be part of this conversation. The Green Climate Fund is, the mandate is to promote paradigm shift in developing countries to move to low emissions and climate resilient pathways. We do this through a transformative approach that has four main pillars. The first is transformational planning and programming to maximize the synergies between adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development. Second is by catalyzing climate innovation, business models, technology, etc. Third is by de-risking investment to mobilize both public and private finance at scale. And fourth is through mainstreaming climate risks. And we'll speak more of this later. This is kind of the status of the portfolio so far, speaking about climate ambition, climate finance. We were established in 2015, and in 5 years, we have one of the fastest growing pipelines and portfolio on climate action. We have allocated 8.3 billion to 121 countries. This has a total project value of 30 billion. And our readiness funds, which are also very important in supporting the capacities of countries to access the big climate finance pots. There also we have allocated more than 300 million to 140 countries. And among the top 5 recipients of GCF funding right now, the top 2 are Mongolia and second is Bangladesh, again CVF countries. This is just a snapshot of the role of GCF in terms of the multilateral climate finance landscape done by the Heinrich Böll Stiftung organization. Balancing the funding between mitigation and adaptation is one of the unique features of the Green Climate Fund. It's very challenging, but we're committed, and we have an upcoming board meeting in June, and I think we'll see more of the adaptation projects, hopefully that go through the board. Again, we also, I think there were talks about public-private finance, private sector. We have a dedicated private sector facility. And in going forward, we are also looking at increasing private investments in terms of our overall portfolio. This is a snapshot of our support for CVF countries, and about 43.4% of our funding so far has been to the CVF countries. And then when we look at overall in terms of our performance metrics, because this is about speed, this is about scale, which is all very important, we are pleased to say that in the last 2 years, we have doubled our programming capacity and also tripled the number of projects in our portfolio. We are also moving towards faster approvals. The time taken for approvals in the last board, which was in March, was 34% faster than the average for 2020 last year, and 58% faster than 2019. This is not to say that that everything is perfect, that we do need to do better, and we're very committed towards that. And we are now poised to allocate at least 1 billion per board, so 3 billion a year of highly catalytic climate finance. And by the end of 2021, the portfolio is likely to grow to 10 billion. And here I'd also like to thank the support of countries like the UK, Germany, who are front loading some of their funding to us because the pipeline is so strong and there's such high demand right now. This is again as an overview of the readiness funding, which is just as important, and all 48 countries have received readiness funding from us. There are almost 140 projects so far in terms of what's there. This is an important point also because we are really looking at supporting blended finance models that work for SIDS, LDCs. Currently, blended finance models tend to work for OECD countries and emerging markets. And here, as I've shown earlier, we have a whole range of financing instruments, loans, grants, equity guarantees, and results-based payment, which can be combined to structure innovative projects where we can really take a major share of the de-risking role that helps to catalyze the additional financing. This is an example of a very unique project, blended finance, all of that. This is the Global Subnational Climate Fund. Thanks to Ambassadors Valentina Arugaveza, also Prasad, and Ambassador Rattray for co-hosting a briefing on the of this initiative for us earlier in the year. Because again, this is really one of those breakthrough projects. It's in 42 countries. Where 15 of this is, I think, CVF countries. And this is really about attracting private investment at a subnational level, which is really difficult. And from a finance perspective, we put in 150 million in equity, which is high risk capital, in addition to a grant component. And this is for projects in both mitigation and adaptation, regenerative agriculture, water waste management, all of that. And not only did we provide this kind of financing in terms of significant equity and the grant component, but we also took a first loss position and de-risked it. And again, $1 from GCF has the potential to catalyze about $25 from the private sector again. So this all speaks to the kind of innovative financing that we can do that really catalyzes additional financing, both public and private. In this case, it is more private financing. And this is also another initiative, the Energy Access Relief Facility, where we put in 30 million in equity, also this one. And this was really for, I think, 9 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, helping private sector investors working on renewable energies, SMEs, to really stay solvent because they have a liquidity crunch because of COVID, and to maintain staff and supply lines so that they don't go bankrupt. And so this speaks to our approach on climate resilient recovery, which is also very important given the context of COVID-19. We have a 3-pronged approach. The first is to be flexible and adaptive in terms of the portfolio management, focusing very much on getting the money out because it's still a significant injection of liquidity into countries. Second is setting up this rapid readiness window where you could get accelerated funding from the readiness allocations, and very much helping countries to craft stimulus measures that could be part of the recovery plans, also on new financing, initiatives that would leverage more of the grants, equity components rather than the debt. And so things like debt swaps, for example, that we're working on with Antigua and Barbuda. And the last bubble there is about our project finance and some of the examples you've already seen. I'll end with these 2 slides. One is that we are working on the sectoral guidelines. It's open for consultations. It's really important that there's good participation and contributions because this is really about how we can invest in paradigm shifting investments going forward, and it's in all these different thematic areas. And then lastly is COP26 is really a big milestone for all of us. We see this as one of the most important COPs, and there are a couple of initiatives, flagship investments that we hope that our board will approve in the coming months. Again, there are different combinations of CVF countries here, but again, showing the catalytic role of public-private finance, blended finance models, and most importantly, a sense of hope and confidence in an ambitious and successful COP. I'm going to end here and happy to take any questions.
I thank you, Ms. Bisht, Babita, for your very informative presentation and for sharing with us useful information regarding access to the Global Climate Fund for the Green Climate Fund for the CVF member states. And we are happy to see that the fund is maintaining a near equal balance between adaptation and mitigation. And it is imperative to continue the fund's efforts to ensure transformative impacts on the ground for the most vulnerable countries. Thank you very much, Babita. And, do stay with us. I think there could be more questions from the floor. Excellencies, dear colleagues, friends, we heard 4 very rich presentations, and I thank each of our panelists for being with us today and for their presentation. We will now open the floor for reactions and comments from the floor. And I'm very pleased to see a large presence of my good friends, ambassadors, and representatives from the CVF countries today. And we have a few requests already from the floor, and I'll start with that list. Others who wish to take the floor may please indicate that interest in your chat function. So let me start with Ambassador, my good friend, Ambassador Rodrigo Corazzo, the permanent representative of Costa Rica. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And it's always so nice to be with convener, my dear friend Rabat Fatima. Thank you for leading this group during this very particular year. Let's work together and let's work to see how we can fit into the works of COP26 on behalf of the CVF's, the Climate Vulnerable Forum, of which Costa Rica is member since its creation, I understand, in 2009, and has become throughout these 12 years ever more vulnerable within a very vulnerable region, which is the Caribbean basin, in which not only the islands of the East are there, but also the very narrow mainland of the West, of which Central American countries are 6 of them. So we have to agree and appreciate the presentations that have been made in this meeting by all the speakers, always led by that very clear approach that Ambassador Hart has given to his role in waving a flag from the Executive Office of the Secretary General, which we all appreciate very much. We have to stress the fact that yes, we are definitely for a very ambitious approach in NDCs from all countries, from Costa Rica, in a particular reaching or leading towards this net zero by 2050 or before, and keeping the temperature not surpassing an increase of 1.5, but also stressing the fact that the financing is absolutely necessary. This gap that keeps existing has to be worked at by all parties involved. And of course, the separation of funding both for adaptation and mitigation, which is absolutely necessary. In Costa Rica, in the last 3 years, I would say, we have been working strongly in order to find the way in which integrate this adaptation priorities into the national and the local planning. It's not an easy task. We have to be ambitious. We have to be bold in doing that, because we are convinced it is the only way. And well, to say that lastly, that we are frequent frequent users of the different lines of action of the Green Climate Fund, to which we are always very appreciative and like to try the innovative approaches that the fund has put into action in our region for the vulnerable countries and for the world at large. The big challenge I see with all this intense activity leading towards COP, how nice it is to see all this process of preparation that have been mentioned by Ambassador Young. Thanks very much for that presentation. All these issues, how to put them together and how to make the best out of the many synergies that have been already attained. I mean, how to break silos, how to continue in doing that process of evolving towards common and daring solutions. So thank you very much, and let's keep on being together, finding synergies and being very, very ambitious.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And yes, let us be together. I now have the pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Parksley, Permanent Representative of Malawi. Dear Brother Parks, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rabab. It's a pleasure to be here. It's the first time I'm attending the CVF meetings, but glad that all my friends are here, including Ambassador Hart, who I have had the pleasure of meeting in other meetings, and the other delegates, especially from the UK, now that they are chairing the COP26. Just this morning, I was in a meeting with UNCDF. It was a ministerial meeting of the local climate adaptive living facility. This is a facility that is hosted by UNCDF, and I'm glad to note that Bangladesh and some countries in the CVF are already members of that local facility. And I'm also glad to note that the GCF has recognized that facility as one of the blended finance models that they are working together with, and where they have been convinced, they are actually awarding direct access to GCF funds. I am not probably the right person, should be UNCDF talking about this, but I'm talking about it because in my capacity as chair of LDC, I am also co-chair of the board of Local. And this rhymes very, very well with everything that we are talking about here as innovative methods of financing. And adaptation, as said by Ambassador Hart and everybody, is not being financed as much as mitigation. And this facility, which uses national systems, is not a project, is to work with local communities to solve their problems, the local communities' problems. You note that it has been said that so far, financing for adaptation, only about less than 20% of it trickles down to the local communities, to the grassroots. And we need to change that narrative. So I am sure that we will discuss more about this local climate adaptive living facility for my good friends, especially Ambassador Rabab, who is a co-chair of the PrepCom, LDC PrepCom. It's one of the facilities that as LDCs, we have said that it should be used more in future. And countries, including today, Jamaica, that has joined this facility, shows that it has a big potential to answer some of the problems that we have. Now, to finalize, so I'm kind of selling the idea that we should be using this facility more and more because it's already recognized by GCF. To finalize the two recommendations that I have is for us to still request for more grant-based financing. You know, for adaptation, I think Ambassador Hart will agree with me, the grant element of the financing is dwindling little by little, and more money is now through loans. We need to reverse that. And secondly, use systems like local that minimize costly intermediation of financing. We need to change that. Instead of only 20% trickling down to the grassroots, to the local people, more of the money we use should get to the local people instead of losing too much of it in financial intermediation. Let me thank you, Ambassador Rabab, for this meeting and all members of the CVF, including SG Hart. I thank you all for your listening. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Ambassador Ligoya, for your very important remarks. And now I give the floor to my good friend, Ambassador Amrit Rai, the permanent representative of Nepal. Amrit, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rabab. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, panelists, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Rabab, the Chair of the CVF, for hosting today's event and for the excellent steering of the forum along with other Troika members in this critical juncture. As some of the panelists echoed earlier during their briefings, that securing 1.5-degree goal is critical, and particularly it is critical for the climate vulnerable countries. And the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic has further, of course, exposed and increased our vulnerabilities. And we all know the irony of the climate change is that the brunt of the climate crisis has been endured disproportionately by those countries which have least contributed to the emissions. And COP26 in Glasgow this year could be an important opportunity to awake the world from the slumber of inaction and piecemeal tokenism. And CVF has an important role to play to underline the urgency and push for greater ambition. And I appreciate the role of panelists for leveraging the united voice of CVF to address the key priorities of our countries. And it is good to hear of the chair countries of COP26, how best they are pushing the G7 and G20 to come up with an ambitious goal during and before COP26. And we should all put our best foot forward to tackle the battle of the climate crisis. As a country with high mountains, which is also serve as water tower and pulse of planet, climate change is an issue of survival for my country, Nepal. And Nepal has submitted its second NDC in December last year, broadening the ambition as well as sectoral coverage of 2016 NDC. And our aim is to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. And Nepal has also identified adaptation priorities and actions across thematic areas. And climate action for vulnerable countries like us will also hinge on access on climate financing and affordable technology. And development partners need to undertake their responsibility while the world fell short of realizing the $100 billion climate financing target by 2020. And studies have shown that it is still feasible to achieve the goal of net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. We need renewed political determination. And let us put our united voice to muster the political determination at COP26 in Glasgow. Once again, I thank you, Bob, for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Rai. Thank you, Amrit, for your important remarks. We have two more requests. First, I'd like to give the floor to the representative of Morocco, followed by the ambassador of Bhutan. Distinguished representative of Morocco, you have the floor.
Yes, Your Excellency, Ambassador Rabab, I wish to thank you very much for hosting this CVF timely meeting and briefings. And on behalf of my ambassador, Omar Hilal, I would like to thank you for your active leadership. First of all, on this platform and on different other forums in the United Nations that are dedicated to climate action. Morocco's full commitment and support to deliver ambitious results for CVF countries in adaptation, financing, and energy transition remain unchanged, and we are committed to continue working in this field. We are a member of this group because we are convinced and committed to an ambitious global climate agenda, and especially more ambition for developing and vulnerable countries. As one of the briefers rightly mentioned earlier, it is not only about pushing donors hard to scale up their finance and to meet the pledge of $100 billion per year, but it is also about ensuring a fair balance between finance dedicated to adaptation and finance dedicated to mitigation. And we are proud to continue implementing one of the key adaptation projects that was co-funded with the Green Climate Fund, which is the climate smart farming for Argania, through which Morocco launched the plantation of 10,000 hectares of Argania trees. Just last week, we celebrated with the United Nations the first international celebration of this tree as an illustration or as an example of what climate adaptation is able to deliver, not only for the environment, but also for the livelihoods and for the local populations in a country such as Morocco. And of course, it can go beyond that. Empowering non-state actors to help in developing bankable projects that attract the right kind of investors and funding is crucial. And here we join this with the plea that was launched for having more finance or more funding, because although we have the money, sometimes the projects need to have the right criteria or the minimum criteria to attract the right investment. And so the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action that supports the implementation, of course, of the Paris Agreement, but also it enables collaborations between governments and cities, regions, businesses, investors that also must act on climate change. We do believe that local actors are tremendously important to keep this dynamic going and to give it life through concrete initiatives. So finance goes hand in hand with bankable projects, as I said, and we really appreciate all the work that is done by the Green Climate Fund, of course, by Ambassador Hart and his team, and various other stakeholders that are fully committed to this agenda. I have two questions that I'd like to share. The first one is to the GCF and also to Ambassador Hart. As we are approaching key climate momentums in 2021, including the Food System Summit, we would like to know how can this platform specifically further highlight the needs and the opportunities of financing small farm holders, especially in vulnerable countries, to climate change. We see this as a really important element to deliver upon. And also, how can we use existing platforms that already provide financial and technical support within the framework of South-South cooperation? I can mention 3 commissions, like the Congo Basin Climate Commission that is chaired by the Republic of Congo, the Climate Commission of the Sahel region that is chaired by the Republic of Niger, and the Climate Commission of Island States chaired by the Republic of Seychelles. These 3 commissions were actually launched during the COP22 in Marrakesh, and they have been continuously evolving since. So linking them with what is going on actually is also of importance. Thank you again, Madam Ambassador, and thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, distinguished representative of Morocco, for your important statement. And now we have the last request on the floor, Ambassador Doma Shering, permanent representative of Bhutan. Doma, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, dear Rabab. I'd like to thank you and your team at the Bangladesh Mission, Chair of the CVF, for convening this timely meeting, and also other members of the Troika and distinguished panelists for their remarks. It is indisputable that there is no greater need than keeping the planet safe for life to continue. So in that context, Bhutan attaches great value to the role and initiatives of the CVF V20 group of countries and of efforts to strengthen our coordination and collective action, particularly in the lead up to COP26. As one of the countries on the front line, Bhutan's priority is to improve our ability to adapt to the effects of climate change, to build resilience to climate shocks, reduce vulnerability, and decrease the costs of loss and damage. Adaptation and building resilience and loss and damage must remain political priorities leading up to and during COP26. ASG Hart's message on the critical imperative of closing the ambition gap, the fundamental importance of net zero emissions and more ambitious NDCs is loud and clear. We are fully on board and wholeheartedly join hands with the SG on that effort. Finance, of course, is pivotal to implementation of adaptation priorities and remains a priority for Bhutan as well. Of course, we must see here 50-50 balance between mitigation and adaptation, and we must continue to press for the availability of new, scaled up, predictable, accessible, and sustainable finance. And here I'd like to emphasize the importance of strengthening direct access to ensure country ownership, alignment with national priorities, and to build local capacity. Ambassador Rabab, I just wanted to take the floor briefly to assure you that Bhutan is ready to work closely, as always, with Bangladesh and other members of the CVF in our collective efforts to move forward on these objectives in the lead up to COP26. We support that the CVF should seize the forthcoming multilateral opportunities to strengthen our commitment and to amplify our messages. Please count on Bhutan's support in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you so much, dear Doma, for your kind words of support, and certainly we'll be counting on that support as we move towards COP26. Thank you again, Doma, for being with us today. That was the last request that we had from the floor. I would now like to actually turn the floor back to the briefers if they wish to respond or make any final remarks before we wrap up the meeting. Thank you very much. Who would like to take the floor first? Mr. Hart, Mr. Young, Ambassador Karoma.
Thanks, Ambassador.
Yes,
I don't mind kicking things off. I am really heartened, but not surprised to hear that there is really this full agreement that the members of the CVF are in full alignment with the priorities that the Secretary General has outlined. This requires us to work closely together over the course of this year. We need to recognize that we can't wait until the COP itself to deliver on all of these priorities. And as I indicated earlier, the upcoming G7 summit represents an important opportunity and an important moment for the developed countries to clearly state not only their commitment to finance, public finance, and to adaptation, but in very concrete terms to indicate how they will meet the 100 billion goal, as well as how they will direct and increase the share of their adaptation finance to at least 50% of total climate finance. We cannot lose this opportunity. We cannot lose this opportunity really to ensure that we make a dent in this adaptation and resilience issue. It's been decades, it's gone on too long, and the situation is getting worse as the world warms. There was a specific question from the distinguished representative from Morocco on a number of the multi-stakeholder coalitions that have been launched in the climate space, as well as how best to utilize some of the upcoming moments this year. One of the things that we've discussed internally is that this year has to be a year of healing for the planet, where we prioritize across all of the meetings and summits that will be held, from climate, biodiversity, the high-level dialogue on energy, the food system summit, that this is an opportunity for us to protect people and planet, and that 2021 must be seen as a year of healing. So we are very focused on ensuring that there's synergies between all of the events and activities that will take place this year. And as it relates to the multi-stakeholder coalition, we're working with all of the coalitions that were launched as part of the Marrakesh Partnership, as well as those coalitions and initiatives that were launched at the Climate Summit of the Secretary General in 2019. But we will follow up with the mission of Morocco to see how we can support specifically some of the coalitions that and initiatives that the distinguished representative made reference to. But again, I'm available at any time to meet with you individually or collectively or in your respective groups. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador Hart. Thank you also again for your assurance that you're here for us, and I'm sure we'll be calling upon you in the coming days. Ambassador Young, Mr. Young, would you like to have one final word?
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of the distinguished representatives for their very clear remarks. And I'm encouraged by the commonality in our expectations, our hopes, but also it is a reminder of the need for us to coordinate, to work together as partners in pursuit of shared outcomes. And I'd be interested in our teams following up afterwards as to how we can support you individually, but also how you can support us in our advocacy, because we are pushing 1.5 alive, more finance, more for adaptation, and we want to be able to partner with you on each of those. Just one more point that I would make is we focused a lot on some of the big politics, but I also don't want to lose sight of the, and I would say this, but the details matter. And that is why the technical work in the negotiations is so crucial. And we are spending the first 3 weeks of June talking about the detailed transparency tables, both on support and on action. We're talking about how Article 6 can enable greater ambition and greater finance for adaptation. We are negotiating the technical details that will enable the comparability, the consistency, and also the timeframes for ambition that actually underpin and give the confidence and comparability that will enable the long-term action. So yes, we need those commitments, we need those statements at the G7, we need all of that ahead of COP, but also I encourage you and your colleagues to really engage on that technical detail, because that matters as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Young. And again, it's really reassuring to see that many of our priorities are common. We share common priorities, and we look forward to remaining engaged very closely with you in the coming days. Thank you again for being with us today. Final word, Mr. Kamuna, anything? Very 1 minute wrap up before I give it to Babita. Okay, I don't think we may have lost him again because he was having some technical problems also. Babita, there was a question directed to you, I believe, from one of these speakers. Would you like to answer that? Again, very brief final remarks, Babita.
I'm here.
Babita, we can't hear you. Unmute yourself, please.
Thank you to everyone for the support for the Green Climate Fund and for the supportive comments. In terms of the engagement with the Food Systems Summit, indeed, that's quite a priority, and we are trying to see how best to engage. We've identified the finance track and the nature positive production track too. I understand in the finance track, they would like us to host some roundtable, and at the same time, in the nature positive production track, we are very excited because we do a lot of forest and land use, including agriculture, especially smallholder agriculture. And we have a lot of big initiatives that hopefully the board will approve, which includes the Amazon, Great Renewal, 11 countries in the Sahel, DRC, the Congo forests, and Mesoamerica, the dry corridor. So hopefully we can actually show these models as we also shape the discussions going forward. But we also count on member states to help advise us on how best we can be of value in these processes too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Babita. Thank you, everyone. We just have 2 minutes left. Let me try to wrap up in 2 minutes. What has been a very, very rich and productive discussion. And I thank you all, especially our briefers, Ambassador Hart, Ambassador Young, Ambassador Kamona, and Ms. Bishop, for your very, very important contribution. And I'm also grateful for all my colleagues who joined us this afternoon. As I had said at the outset, the key objective of today's meeting was to identify ways and means on how the CVF missions in New York can coordinate and remain engaged to contribute to the priorities of this group for COP26. And I thank everyone for sharing their very valuable ideas in this regard. I shall not repeat those. Our experts have taken note and will prepare a summary of the important points made, and we'll share the same with them. And we shall also share the presentations made by the briefers, especially by the GCA and GCF. Leading up to COP26, dear colleagues, we plan to have more meetings, both at ambassadorial and expert levels, to discuss how the CVF perspectives can be further integrated in the ongoing discussions in the lead up to COP26 in a very tangible manner. And we look forward to receiving necessary support from the COP presidency in our efforts in this regard. The upcoming HLPF in July and the high-level week in UNGA provide us good opportunity to engage in fruitful manner and converge on some common elements to contribute to the outcome of the COP26 as well as to the Dhaka-Glasgow Declaration. There are other important processes going on in parallel tracks. Preparation for the COP26, for instance, will also be coinciding with the LDC-5 conference preparations. And we must seize these opportunities to provide special attention to the vulnerabilities of the LDCs in the COP26 agenda and vice versa. And I thank Ambassador Ligoya, chair of the LDC group, for reminding us about that very important link. We are also preparing for the Biodiversity Summit and the Food Systems Summit. There are opportunities for CVF members to also contribute more to those discussions and debate. Once again, I thank you all for joining us, and a special thanks again to our distinguished briefers for their insightful presentations. We look forward to remaining engaged with them as well as with all of you as we prepare for the upcoming important meetings, in particular COP26. Thank you once again for joining us, and let us stay in touch. We finished right on time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was so informative.
Thank you, dear Sister Amatlan. Thank you, Tae. Thank you for being with us. And the Troika will remain in touch with the full group in the coming days. Thank you very much.
Right. All the best.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Tae. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.